Hello, this is the podcast from the international research platform SIMM, with reports and interviews from across the world on the role music can play in social and community programs. I am Lucas Perron. In this SIMM podcast, we have this special episode bringing together biologist Olivier Amand and musician Jean-Luc Plouvier. We met before already and discussed, and we found out that we have, or they have, things to say to each other, which Olivier finds and writes about and does research on in biology, in the natural world, and that Jean-Luc Plouvier finds, studies also, and has experiences within the musical world, music-making world.
Happy to be here to share about biology and music. I mean, I'm a biologist, a researcher. I'm also interested in the question of the relationship between the humanity and nature within the Michel Serres Institute, and with some of the biological questions I address in my lab. There are some thematics, let's say, that are related to other disciplines, and so that's why I'm so happy to have this discussion with Jean-Luc on the music.
I'm Jean-Luc Plouvier, pianist, and one of the co-founders, could I say, of contemporary ensemble Ictus in Brussels.
Yes. And so, Jean-Luc, maybe I can start with a question to you. Of what you read of Olivier's work recently, what strikes you, what sticks out as something that you recognize within your experience of music making?
Yes, firstly, I consider that we are now living in a period where the main questions for contemporary music are no longer the question of languages, as it could be the case in the 50s, let's say. The big question of neoclassicist style was in concurrence with serialist style, electroacoustic music. It was a big deal about that. And now, as everybody knows, we are in a period of heterogeneity of styles, many styles, and even many instrumental setups. Every composer, there's a bit of a trend today, every composer builds his own instrument, his own electronic and acoustic setup. And the question is more how to make a group, how to make a band, how to practice music. And that's why it was important first to be... I felt extremely concerned by the beginning of the book of... the little one, the manifest, Antidote to the Cult of Performance.
Yeah, which is translated recently in English.
With this title, I think, Antidote to the Cult of Performance. Perfect title for a French-speaking guy. The words are totally similar in English. And Olivier starts with the question of the Goodhart's law. Or maybe you mentioned rule of Goodhart's. I don't know how you say Goodhart's law. Yeah. When a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be reliable. That's the idea. And you can apply that to music in different ways. For example, if you say that contemporary music, the function of contemporary music is to produce innovation in music. If this is your starting point, if this measure, innovation, becomes a target, you don't produce anything really artistically relevant. But it's even the same if you use the older parameter of beauty, simply said. It's a question for all artists, and I'm very interested by that. If the beauty is your only target, and if you say, I want to produce beauty, how to produce beauty here and now, that's sure that you will only produce kitsch. Maybe it's the definition of kitsch. If you go directly to beauty. The question of beauty, as the question of innovation, has to be forgotten a bit. And you have to question the conditions of producing innovation or beauty, and what's the real conditions here and now to produce beauty.
This is maybe also a question that comes maybe more back into certain forms or styles or genres of music, such as free jazz. And this is a genre that when you're not teaching, when you're not studying and researching and writing books, Olivier, this is what at least you want to play. And as a musician...
Yeah, no, it's true. Actually, I mean, it's sort of an alignment, let's say, between what I say and what I play. I mean, with free jazz is... I mean, it's the idea, again, as Jean-Luc said, it's not the target. The important thing is the path. It's a very classic thing, but we enjoy the path. And actually, we find new things in the path, but we don't know what we're going to find. So it's research applied to music in some ways, right? And this is a very profound systems thinking idea. The idea that when you want to do something, often we focus on the solution. And we want the easy fix solution. We usually don't think of the conditions in which the solution can emerge. So that means that when you think of the solution, that's without law. You're going to put everything on that solution and you're going to forget everything else. When you think of the conditions in which the solution emerge, it means that you don't know the solution. Mm-hmm. So you're in a vulnerable state where you put yourself in a weakness position. But by doing this, you say, I need help. And when you say, I need help, you are in the cooperative path. And this is what is prolonged, this is what is durable, this is what is sustainable, I mean, in every sense, actually. And so this is what is enjoyable. Mm-hmm. There is, Simon Sinek has made a conference on this, I mean, on a related topic. He's talking about the infinite game. So, when we think of the game, usually it's the game you play for sport, for board games or these kind of things. And the goal of this type of game is to win. And then it's to finish. So any game, usually it's a competition where the number of players is determined, the rules are set, and you want to win. But when you think about life in general, we don't play this type of games. So we don't play what we can call the finite game. We play infinite games. So the infinite games, that's when the rules are changing all the time, the number of partners are changing all the time, and the goal is not to win, it's to keep on playing. And that's very different, because then the conditions of the solution, I mean, the solution is actually, we don't know what it is, but it's just the joy of the path, not to reach some target, which, I mean, from a biologist, reaching a target, it's to die. It's death. Right, the target, it's death. So the path is much more enjoyable than or I don't know if death is enjoyable, but it's not a target, an enjoyable target. Let's say. So just the path before the solution, before the target, it's definitely a philosophy of life.
Jean-Luc, in a previous conversation we had outside of this recording, you were giving the example of 18 musicians of Steve Reich, where a series of different systems, you could say, come together without it being very clear necessarily how they come together. And that makes it also inconsistencies, in fact, within that music and within the experience of playing it, and especially the experience of hearing it and listening to it. Is maybe a good example you could explain to us.
If I remember well, I mentioned this work just to illustrate the idea of emergence. Something has to emerge. Mm-hmm. How could I say?
It's not something that is fixed in advance.
No, that's it. It's even not in the score somehow. Yeah. It's not in the score. But also, I wanted to illustrate the idea of something that emerges, but also to fight against the idea that minimalist music or minimalist art in general is just you get what you get, mm-hmm. It's just what it is. Minimalist music is always more than it is. If the simple is simply simple, if the formal process simply is a formal process, then we will have no level of transcendence. Yes, music for 18 musicians. What I tried to illustrate with this work was the idea of something has to emerge, mm-hmm. which is even not in the score. And because there is something more in a score of minimalist music, let's say by Steve Reich or Philip Glass, than what it is. What it is what it is. This idea a bit Gertrude Steinian is not true at all. Minimalist art is always about simple objects that are trembling, are shivering, and challenging the perception somehow because it's trembling. And Steve Reich has a particular art to canonize little patterns with themselves at high speed that creates a kind of cognitive challenge for the listener, because you will recompose point by point new melodies and new patterns, because the texture is so complex that you cannot totally identify the canons like you could do in Johann Sebastian Bach, for example. Here it's kind of complex material, and the brain will try to recompose new voices. Then we could speak of emergence or even transcendental voices, new voices, different for everyone.
And also different from performance to performance.
Yes, probably, but it's overall that you cannot totally analyze it. It's different for everyone. And it has, even if Steve Reich made a theory of that, he called that psychoacoustic subproducts of repetition. He has this conscious idea that he's producing more than what was written in the score, but without being able to define it in advance. Then composing a score is proposing material to the listener, and the listener will finally find more than it was written. There is something anti-romantic directly coming from John Cage in the New York School to make something simple. Everything is on the table. The material is simple. You are not playing with the signs of distinction or great art, but the system itself, the systemic of the composition itself will produce additional voices and this impression that there is something transcendental emerging from the material.
So Olivier, you want to intervene? Is there?
Yes.
Or does it make you think of examples out of the natural world?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think it's maybe one reading of it, but I would say it's the word organic maybe is relevant here. It means that when you have repetitive patterns like this, and you don't exactly know what it will create in the human brain, someone who is going to process all this, then actually the control is not on the score. You lose control because you don't really know how it's going to be perceived. I mean, you have an idea, but everybody is going to have a different transcendence in a way. Yeah? It's going to be different for everyone. And this is a typical systems rule. You know, it's that famous equation that says 1 + 1 = 3. Because if you if you add the interactions, you get more than 2, you get 3. If A interacts with B, if B interacts with C, then A also interacts with C. So you have 2 interactions and you create a third one. And it's that's maybe one reading of this is if you have these patterns that are emerging like this, actually when you compose, when Steve Reich is composing this, he's probably putting a third component in the picture, which is the listener. which is not on the score, but it's open to that listener to see different scales, I would say, of listening. Right? And that's what's so transcendent in some ways, is that we can see that it's infinite, because we detect some patterns, some scales of patterns. But probably there's some patterns over the millions of years, right? But we human, we won't be able to see them, right? But they exist as well. It's just that that's the trance, right?
Can we talk a bit more about improvised types of music, where the results are, for other reasons, not known in advance? Also, let's talk about improvised music played by an ensemble of musicians, not by one person as playing on his or her own.
There's one key to improvisation is to leave room. You need to have that leeway, right? So there's maybe one idea. You start with an idea, but you don't really know where you're going to go, and means that it's a bit like for a company with the raison d'être, the rational, I guess, how you say that in English. It's just to say, well, there's a few rules that we all apply to. It's 5 sentences, 5 principles that we agree on, but how we interpret it locally can be different. The improvisation, I think it's a little bit the same. When you start an improvisation, you have an idea and you sort of stick to it. But you stick to that idea, meaning that you explore how far you can go away from that idea. So it's a bit incoherent, actually, because you have one idea, but your goal is to go as far as you can from that idea, but not too far so that it's another idea. So you explore that space that is a bit difficult to define, where it's still the idea, but it's not another idea, and it's that space in between. And there's a lot to explore in there. And for me, that's one key component of improvisation.
And that's true for when you're on your own, but when you're playing with others, you will meet the other ideas and try to have them come together. Many unknowns, really, that come together.
Including mistakes, which, someone could call that a mistake, but actually it's an idea. It's another idea to feed the ground.
It's also for an improviser, the question is always the first note. That's a question also for classical musicians or good students, let's say, trying to learn improvisation. At a certain moment comes the question, why to play this first note or this one? And here there is a question of random, to make a pact with random is good at a certain moment. And random, we recognize random because I'm a good student in the 4 qualities described by Olivier, the 4 qualities of robustness, summarize, slowness, random, redundancy, incompleteness. And random, it's really this question. If you question a jazzman, how do you start? What's your first note? What do you choose, this note or this one? Systematically, they will answer you, do anything. Just play any note, whatever works. Throw a note. And then your task will then be to make sense of it after the fact. And that's when the improvisation work begins. Always I remember Philippe Boussemans. He was a classical composer, not a jazzman. Opera composer that I knew well. He was used to play a game. When you called him, he said, Jean-Luc, give me a note. Give me a note now. I said, okay, D flat. Okay. And then he promised to put this note in his score at this moment, just to have the pleasure to recompose after the fact his score with a new note.
He asked you while he was composing.
Yes.
Okay.
No, but the idea that random is a friend.
Yeah.
How
random can be a friend in biology.
Exactly. Randomness is the key, actually. So when you think of us, actually, each living being on Earth is the product of randomness. If you think of your chromosomes, they are all a random mix of the chromosome of your parents. And this is our genetic patrimony, right? Which is based on randomness. And there's a lot of things like this, like the antibodies we generate to fight infections, again, completely random. So there's a whole set of biology that is called stochastic biology that is only studying random processes in biology. So it's just to tell you it's not anecdotic. It's actually, there's a lot of them. And the more we fish for them, the more we find them. And actually, when we think about it, it's exactly what you say. It's a way to be in motion. So if you don't allow yourself to be random at some point, then you're going to reach DeFi. Right? You won't move. So to be able to move, at some point you have to do something
To
randomly,
allow it.
yeah. And then everything you do afterwards is to react. And actually, living systems are reactive systems. They respond all the time. They hear signals, they respond to signals, but you need that first signal. And randomness is often the one that is triggering life, basically.
Yes, and the best solution to invent a beautiful phrase in improvisation music is to make a wrong note. Then you make a wrong note. It's a kind of nonsense for a few milliseconds, but immediately you try to make sense after the fact, and you will invent something.
It's also possible in classical music to play wrong notes and to.
It's not that far from classical music. Huh? All the system dissonance, consonance in Baroque music is due to that. The dissonance is full of wrong notes in classical music.
It's even a trick in jazz improv, right? So if you have a few bars in a certain scale, one way to sound really out there is to play a half note. So everything is off, right? If you play the half note, it's completely off. But if you finish with that 1/3, that's it. You resolved all the mess you generated. Right?
But if you don't mind, Olivier, we could continue to explore the 4 qualities of robustness.
Yes.
It's a bit academic maybe, but it's a good idea because every quality resonates with music for me. The first, slowness, par excellence, refers to the famous bourgeois opinion that artists are lazy. No, artists are slow. For example, a month's work to compose 5 minutes of music. That's classical.
Yeah. You can be siderated by a piece of art, right? Sometimes you're really stuck. Or when you listen to music, sometimes you're just really with the music. So you're almost not with your regular brain anymore. You're in a different sphere. And actually, often you're actually synchronized with everyone else that is listening to the music. So you're really you're out there, right? Literally out there. And so slowness is it's that moment of arrest, where when you stop doing something, that's when everything is possible. Because when you don't stop, actually you're the hamster in the wheel, right? In some ways, I mean, it's a caricature. You're a bit like stuck in the path. But if you stop, then that's it. You can derail. You can go somewhere else. And so that's why in biology there's so much slowness, so much delays. Because not only it's necessary to branch, to transform, to change path, but it's also it's actually almost contradictory. So it's a way to transform, to have this moment of arrest, but it's also a way to oscillate all the time and to be stable. Because if you think of biology, actually biology is a bunch of cycles. Circadian cycle, menstrual cycle, cell cycle. I mean, everything is cycling. So if you develop that in time, so a cycle is an oscillation. So oscillation in time. If you want to maintain an oscillation in time, you have to actively maintain a delay. If you reduce the delay, then you're going to dampen the oscillation. And then it's going to be a flat line. And a flat line, it's death. So as long as you're alive, you oscillate. And that's the beauty of biology. It's one key element of biology. It's everything is oscillating. And when you oscillate, you can do 2 things. You can maintain the stability despite external fluctuation, and you can transform because you're always in a state of transformation. So it's schizophrenic in some ways. You're
That's your idea of bistability?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes,
it's
okay.
a bistable state. Exactly.
That's developed in your second book, no?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
Absolutely.
okay, so.
And slowness is absolutely necessary for this to happen. If you remove slowness, if you try to be as fast as possible, if you want to remove all the delays, then you won't have this, and then it's very fragile.
Incoherence translated into inconsistency?
There could be inconsistency, but actually in biology, in molecular biology, in systems biology, there's even an expression for this, which is incoherent feed-forward loop. So actually the word incoherent is used by a biologist to say exactly this. So loops where you have an internal contradiction in the system, which is slowing down everything, but it's also generating this oscillation that are allowing stability and transformability.
And you can say also just internal contradiction.
Internal contradiction, yeah.
Something like that. And that speaks to me but this time not about composition, not about improvisation, but about really interpretation, performing. Yes, because I've always noticed that in classical romantic scores, the most effective indications for the performer and the ones that speak to us best are those that contain a contradiction. Piano, ma sonore, typically Chopin. Allegro, ma non troppo. Forte, without brutality, for example, things like that. Lentement, mais en avançant. Slowly, but go ahead, etc. The performer is challenged to negotiate all time and to fine-tune. The model for me is the radio. You have to imagine that the performer is like a child listening to radio, but it's an old radio, it doesn't work. It's tiring, it's demanding. All time you have to fine-tune with different requirements.
This fine-tuning is an really important element.
Yes, you always have to fight against something when you interpret music. If you feel at ease, it will not work. That's the great lesson of music to me. If you have to play calm music and you are too calm, you just play calmly the calm music, it will not work. You have to put a kind of tension in it. Otherwise, even the calm music will just collapse.
Energy.
I call it the fight with the angel, biblic image that I use in my inner monologue. You can say that music is an angel or music is divine, but it's the Jacob's angel. You have to fight against music all time as a performer. It's also the model of you have to imagine a kind of double timeline, like two transparent layers. The metronomic timeline or the stopwatch timeline is running, and the performing timeline is almost in phase, but not totally. If it's totally in phase, the music is just what it is, and it will collapse. But it's in advance, it's too late, and that's the fact that you experience when you play music. But first, you are too slow, for example. You are too slow. The music doesn't run. There is no energy. Then you have to go. If you go, suddenly you're too fast. And that was the case when I was 18 years old. I was systematically too fast. I wanted to play the strongest, and the fastest that I could. But I was almost collapsing all time. All time reaching my own impossibility to continue. I was playing Bach faster and faster. I wanted to play as fast as Glenn Gould, and it was too fast for my fingers, and I was endangered all the time. Then I learned to put another input in it, this kind of maturity, of just expressivity, something coming from the language maybe, just to articulate language. And then finally I have found this right negotiation between going fast, going forward and going backwards. And it's the same with the dynamics. If you play, in the music schools, it's recommended to be a sutil musician, playing extremely soft. But if you play too soft, the sound becomes blank and dead. It's a dead sound. Then within the soft dynamics, you have to impulse kind of louder, kind of energy. And the opposite. If you try to play louder and louder and louder, at a certain moment you will explode. The piano will explode. And within the loudest dynamics, you have to input another algorithm, something calming down the game.
To react to that.
Yeah, no, exactly. It resonates so much with. I'm going to give you the example of a plant. A plant, it's growing. It's growing because water is coming in. So basically, a plant is tissue that is inflated with water. There's a huge pressure in a plant. It's the same pressure you have in a champagne bottle or in a bike tire. So it's about 10 times the atmospheric pressure. So it's really, really high pressure. And what do the plant do with this? So the more there's water coming in, the more they have pressure, the more they grow. The more they grow, the more they do photosynthesis. And when they do photosynthesis, they synthesize cellulose. Cellulose is as stiff as steel, extremely stiff. So when plants are growing, actually they are breaking because they rigidify their cells. And so that's why it resonates with me, because it means that for a plant to grow, it needs to grow while breaking at the same time. So big contradiction, right? So you grow and you break at the same time. And the key to this is that when you do this, you're always able to adapt. So it's dynamic tuning. I could call it like this, dynamic balance. So when you have these two forces, one really strong force to grow, one really strong force to break, when you have the two together, then you have, in this case, a mechanical balance for the plant, but just balance, dynamic balance. And what I hear for the music, maybe it resonates in that sense. Is that if I say something very soft, very pianissimo, but with no intention, no pressure, right? Almost no air is coming out of my mouth. It's going to sound empty. Whereas if I use exactly the same nuance, like a pianissimo, but with a lot of pressure, like this, to really try to be, that's going to sound pianissimo with intention, with force, right? And so that's the contradiction, right? You're going to put a lot more energy to play a pianissimo than a fortissimo.
Exactly.
And actually, on the time,
what you just said is easy to understand for the listeners with the example of the voice, no? Mm-hmm. It's easy to understand that if you have to sing, something like that, a Mozart aria, Don Giovanni, calmly expressed, as you have to put a lot of energy for the voice not to break. Huh? Mm. It's more difficult than shouting, screaming.
Yeah. And it's the same for the clarinet, by the way. So when we play the clarinet, we always say that you have to put a lot of pressure in the air column. It has to be really strong, right? So that it's the same, right? So if you just you only have air in your mouth, the sound is going to be terrible, right? It's going to be wrong, actually. And it's not even going to be the note you want to play, right? So you really have to have the note completely. But I also wanted to bounce back on the, when you play and you don't know if you're too fast or too slow. There's a good paradox for this is bebop. Exactly. Bebop jazz is super fast.
Especially double bass players in bebop.
No? Exactly, it's crazy, right? But when you think about it, they're always off. They're always, a little bit behind on the time, right? Au fond du temps, we say in French, right? So really, almost not at the time, right? Not the metronomic time. But they go super fast, but they're completely off. They're slow by, a quarter of a second or something, right? And that's the paradox that puts it in motion. If it was robotic, it would be dead, basically. So it's alive because it has this tension.
Yes, but if you play a bit before the beat, it's a temptation then to rush and to rush more and more.
That's true.
Then, still in this case, the double bass player has to activate a kind of impatience, but also to inhibit this impatience.
It's the quote from Camus, un homme, ça s'empêche.
Un homme, ça s'empêche.
So yeah, so we are full of contradiction, basically.
This was just about slowness, randomness.
Yeah.
The third one is redundancy. That's the word you
redundancy. Yeah.
Repetition, redundancy.
Yeah.
Well, that's very clear for all people coming from music or theater, because it's same in French. It's clear the same word for rehearsal and repetition. So répétition. We have to rehearse, we have to repeat.
It's never exactly the same, right? So when you repeat each time, you see something It's like the patterns with Silver Reich, right? So the repetition is generating something else. And
yes,
so
to leave a room for something to emerge. And the typical phrase that I heard thousands of times coming from, let's say, the leaders, the choreographer, the stage director, the conductor, on n'y est pas. We are not done. We are not. We are not at the right place yet. But nobody knows what is this right place. There is not a right place, a potential right place that has been written yet. On n'y est pas, but we have to go.
He or she imagines it.
But it's the same for evolution. I mean, if I take a really big step out of this, but evolution is like this. On n'y est pas non plus. It means that when you look at animals, mammals like us, I mean, pretty much all mammals have 2 arms, 2 legs, right? I mean, we have the same pattern in some ways, but it's very different. So if you compare, a cow and a human, obviously it's looking different, or a giraffe, right? It's very different. But it's the same pattern. It's the same organization plan. So that's a repetition. So that means that in that taxon of mammals, there's a few rules that are always the same. But it's ongoing exploration. Right now, evolution is trying to find other paths as we speak. The giraffe is trying to evolve. The cow is trying to evolve. We are trying to evolve. It's just that we can see some repeated patterns because it's the building block, let's say, but there's a lot of room. You can see, you can do a whale with a mammal, so you can tell that it can be really strange at the end.
I like what you, Olivier, mentioned regularly, the example of the clouds. Clouds of fish, clouds of birds. I think that the two of you can exchange some ideas about how clouds work in nature and how clouds of music in very different forms of genres.
Yeah. So I mean, the cloud or the group or actually any system. I mean, the interesting thing with this cloud of birds or these fish banks. I mean, all these groups of individuals. What's really striking is that they can suddenly shift in a coordinated manner. It's really striking with the birds because it's a group of birds. You have the thing that they are going to, fall into each other all the time, and thousands of them, right? And they coordinately, change direction. And so we can wonder how they manage this. It's really, it's almost magic. Right? And so it's not magic. We know how it works. So it's always the birds at the periphery that guide the group. Because the birds at the periphery of the group are the ones that are exposed to the fluctuations of the environment. And because of the environment of the world, so they see difference in temperature, the wind, or this kind of things, or like some predator coming. And so because they see this, they synchronize, and then they contaminate the core of the cloud. And then the whole cloud is shifting, is turning. And so it means that any system is shifting from the margin, from the edge. It's always the edge that is seeing the fluctuation of the world. The core of the system is blind to the world. The birds in the middle, they only see the neighboring birds. And they just follow the neighboring birds. And so this is actually a lesson that goes, of course, beyond biology. Because if you look at empires, for instance, when empires have fallen, often this was from something happening on the outside that has contaminated the core. And this is a systems principle, is that usually systems shift, turn, tip from the edge, and it's contaminating the core.
Being on the side or being in the core, I think that now for us, in this field of contemporary music, specialization is no longer something that we need, really. It's delicate, because I don't want to bash any or to ban any practice. People who will study only Beethoven sonate for his whole life, it's so respectable. I have a lot of respect for that. But in my own field, I think that to be the best technician able to play Rachmaninoff, better, stronger, faster, better, as Daft Punk has sung, is no longer what we need. The previous weeks, now I'm speaking, and I remember the previous week I was behind my computer to prepare sounds, electronic sounds, for an Anthony Braxton session in Bern, but I was working with students, and I was a kind of my function of geek. Then I played the concerto for prepared piano by John Cage, and I had to prepare the piano. That's a special skill, to adapt your piano regarding to the score, to be creative, not too much, to be obedient, not too much. I play music, I would text, I programmed music. And I'm not at all the only one to have such a life. That's the normal life of a musician today, to be in between. And I remember when I started in this field of contemporary music in the 90s, went to IRCAM many times, and at this time, it's no longer the case, but at this time it was, the normal practice was to separate, and to have, you have the composer, dans un grand fauteuil, expressing his wishes. I would like that the sound of flute is modulated by the envelope of the tuba. Say it's Emmanuel Lonesh, for example, the composer, and the best technician in town was realizing the wish of the composer. And then there was something lost in this operation. All the experimental process was a bit impossible to do. And with my generation, it changed drastically, thanks to the PC, domestic, the home computers. There is no longer boundary now between technician, being a geek, being a composer, even being a performer. People try and push the limits of the software. They don't study the notice. They make a lot of mistakes from the top. The mistakes are beautiful. The same with artificial intelligence. I don't want to polemic about that, but I have a lot of fun personally. I feel we are endangered by artificial intelligence, but also it's our duty to make fun, to push the boundaries and to use this machine in a perverted way, let's say. And I have fun with that. I never studied. It's not my job to study digital codes, but to make experience with it.
But you're using AI exactly for the right thing, right? For me, the only benefit of AI is serendipity, that you're going to be exposed to things that you did not expect.
Voilà.
That's a surprise, right? And from this, you can create something. Sadly, in the general public, let's say, AI is mostly to help the technician be even more performant, right? So that's really sad, because that's the AI to the useless AI, I would say. This is the beauty of AI, right? So we can decide, huh? We are humans, right? So we could decide.
So to remind you, SIMM is about social impact of music making, and so especially research on this field, this practice of participatory music making. But I think that this discussion is going to have people dream away, and there's a lot of ideas and a lot of examples which are not at all coming out of this practice, this world of social music projects, but I'm sure it will be inspiring for people to listen to your conversation. What I encounter in terms of social music practices, it are practices which are very near to a lot of what we discussed here, because they're near to being confronted with very different worlds which are unexpected, which are unknown, which coming together give also maybe contradictory results and energies. And so people, musicians, artists, and social workers active in this field are people who are capable to allow this unexpected things to come to them and to come into existence. And so that's why I thought it was meaningful to interview the two of you on this.
I can jump on this actually, because why is it so relevant to talk about all this? If we think of the Anthropocene, the socio-ecological crisis, everything like the geopolitical crisis, the poly-crisis, our only certainty is that everything will be more uncertain in the 21st century. So we are living in a world of the unknown. And the only thing we know is that everything will be unknown. And what we're discussing here is that we make something out of the unknown. And so now we can, we as a community, we can create desire around the idea of the unknown. And so for me, that's one answer to the eco-anxiety epidemics. But actually with the unknown, you can realize that actually we are living the world of the known, which is poor. There's not so many interactions. It's the highway, right? The highway, you know where you go, you know the target, but you don't meet anyone on that road, right? So what we are discussing here is a much more desirable, much more joyful world where you play with the unknown. And I mean, the artists, maybe that's where the innovation, if we can recuperate the idea of innovation, that would be this, is to innovate around the unknown. And then, of course, the path gets precedence over the target.
Thank you, Olivier. Nice epilogue. If I want to tease you a bit, I would like, are you promoting the cult of the super creative, modern subject, full of resiliency? Yes
so,
or no?
Not at all. No, not at all, of course.
Not joking.
That's a good point, though, because we can soon be mistaken, right, with collapsology or collapsolatry, maybe. You can really feel that the world of the unknown is an opportunity for the neoliberal model as well, right? So people will fall and then we'll select the one who survive. That's, performance, right? But actually, what I would push for is more the robust world. So robustness is to put yourself in a situation that when it fluctuates, you keep your stability, your viability. Actually, that's what living systems are. Huh? They are robust. And because they're robust, they can fall, but they bounce back. And that's the idea. So it's basically almost the opposite of resilience.
Yeah.
It's not to fall and to bounce back. It's to be in the conditions in which you can have any trajectory, including the one where you fall and you bounce back.
And I can see that also in the young generations of composers, the people in their 20s or 30s, leaving also the world of the high technology, this world where high creativity is similar to high technology. There is now a kind of cult of low-tech for 10, 20 years in the musical field. Composer proud to be on the picture with their 100 euros MIDI controllers, small low-definition speakers, bit of paper, bits of plastic, and toys. That's really kind of epidemic now to the experimental music scenes everywhere. A veritable mess with plastic toys, Goldorak revolver, mini cassettes, teddy bears, etc., etc. And for me, it's a sign that something has changed, and the low-tech is desirable.
And again, it's organic. If you think of life, it's only built on carbon, mostly. Carbon is the magic atom for life. So it's very low-tech. With one atom, or a few others, hydrogen, oxygen, you can pretty much do everything, right? That's very low-tech. And we humans, we make solar panels with 100 different elements, right? Very complex, very fragile, right? So it's
Nice. So, Thank you, Olivier. You have a biologic answer to all my intuitions, all my artistic intuition. That's great.
SIMM is the initiative of scholars and practitioners from 7 different countries and 4 different continents who felt the growing need to find ways to bring together people interested in developing research on the possible role music can play in social and community music programs. Sound engineer and co-editor of this episode of the SIMM podcast is musician Mariusz Radwanski. Please visit our website at SIMM-platform.eu.